All right, welcome to this week's Couch Time with Cataya. I've got my green on for today's Mercury Day. And it's really interesting because my guest today is actually someone who has the same ascendant as me. So we are both mercurial in nature. We are
I
both,
also have my green on, I think. Light green.
okay,
Yeah.
light green. I see like a tealy light bluish green. Yeah.
I'm in my car and there's sun shining, I think, on my clothing. So that's why the
Okay,
full color may not come across. Yeah.
perfect. All right. But you're rocking out the green. You're like,
I'm rocking out the green. Yeah.
rocking out the green. All right. So I'll just do a little description of how I know you, Depesh.
Sure.
So through community and through conscious community, there's definitely a lot of elements of people connecting in and having more personal development focuses and awarenesses. And so we met through a mutual friend in the midst of the interesting last 2.5 years, getting some supplies in order. And so, yeah, connecting in and being able to right away just have conscious conversations and being able to talk about deeper and bigger topics on the table. And I would say that awareness and personal focus is probably your foundation in life. That you're a very aware person, you come in very aware. And so I would say your path is definitely a little bit more focused towards spiritual development and what it looks like to walk the spiritual path.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
Mhm. And what else would you say about yourself? How else would you describe the core things about yourself?
I don't know. I always find it difficult to describe myself when people ask me to describe, you know, anything about me. Everybody perceives me differently. I guess everybody has their own idea of what I am. So it's always interesting to hear other people's perspectives on their take of me instead of my own, you know?
Mhm. And I appreciate that too, because when we think about the lens in which we see the world, the lens in which we interpret the world, it's not uncommonplace for people to really have this experience of like, oh, it's interesting that you experience me this way or that way, where
Mhm.
our true innate nature of how we experience ourselves can be very different to how other people experience us, right? So,
I think I think my path in life is really to let go of any remaining identifications, which there's a lot of, that I've built in within myself, about who I am and what I am really. So that's always a difficult question to ask me to describe myself, because my path mainly is to let go of any identifications that I have with myself. So it's quite interesting.
well, it's funny because what came to mind right away when you were speaking is that and we've had kind of conversations on this nature before, is you're here more to be than to do. So we can be human beings and just constantly, in the do mode of human doings versus human beings, right? And what does it look like to be? What does it look like to just embody oneself, and also to kind of break down the barriers of identification of all these different ways that we can see ourselves as identified and how others identify us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to focus on what's called the D10 chart for you today and pull out the three things that really, really stand out for me for you with your D10. So D10 is also called the Damamsha chart. It's basically the chart for vocation. It's the chart for really understanding what our path is here, which is interesting because we're talking about being, and then we're talking, now talking about sort of what does it look like to have a vocation of doing.
I think it's important actually to incorporate both those things into your life, because I mean you can be no matter what you're doing or not doing, but so that but to incorporate the doing, I think, is been a challenge for me in life, but it's also very important because yeah.
It definitely makes life flow much easier, and it's definitely an enjoyable piece of what we do choose to do brings more enjoyment to our being. In the sense of if
Can you
we're,
hear me?
yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
I can't hear you so well.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, interesting. Okay. Is your volume turned up? Oh, it shows that you're on mute. All right, so I think we sorted out the tech issue there, learning how to pause things when they're happening. So this is always a good thing if we jump into whatever tech is trying to bring us. It's interesting, just a little side tangent. I've been in tech land for the last week sorting out issues with technology. And it's funny because if Uranus is actually transiting a certain part of our chart, it can actually activate and create a whole bunch of tech issues. And so
Mm,
it's just interesting to see what's happening for ourselves when we start to look at transits and we start to look at what's taking place at different points in time. It's literally, I think I probably spent about 15 hours on the phone to various tech companies to try to sort out all kinds of tech issues that have been going on. So uh,
wow.
yeah, it's so helpful to know these things though, right? So it's like
Mm,
we can kind of just understand what influences are coming in and then how to work with those influences.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right. All right. So doing the deep dive into your D10 chart. Okay. So there's a few rules that I look for right away whenever I'm looking at sort of unfolding the D10 chart. So it's again, I definitely attract to me people that are, here to really follow and walk a spiritual path and that are here for personal development work and personal growth work. And so right away, what we look for is what is your what planet is basically going to be influencing your chart with the highest degree in your D1 chart. And so that is Venus. And so Venus sits in your 12th house in your D10 chart. So basically you're taking that information and then you're dovetailing it into the D10 chart. And so with Venus being in the 12th house, it's all about basically needing to dive deep and go deep, and it is in Jishta. So it's interesting, Jishta has come up in the last little while as well. So Jishta is basically the researcher. It's the person who's going to go to the root of the root of the root of the things of information from a positioning of not necessarily just upheavaling the root, but understanding all the information around it. So it is the person who's going to really take the time to understand things on multiple levels and multiple layers and being able to understand how different things connect together. So it's
Mm,
sitting in the 12th house. So the 12th house is definitely, I mean, there can be a very easy dynamic of wanting to like literally be in this life in the sense of when I think of 12th house, it can be like isolation. It can be wanting to go live in an ashram. It can be wanting to just not really be of this world, to be in this world, but not of this world. It
mhm,
certainly is the moksha house, and it's the house for really wanting to, move beyond sort of the structures of what holds us in place in this incarnation. So it's sitting in that position, but it's also in the position of deep diving. So it's not about just sort of being and just kind of chilling out and like almost like disconnecting and disassociating from this world and maybe self-isolation, but it is actually about understanding the roots of what that house brings forward from a place of research. So it is about, really following, and I know that you already do this, is like the teachers, the gurus, the people that really bring forward a lot of wisdom teachings. It's for you to connect in with that place and to connect into that understanding on a very, very deep level. And then what we do is we turn to look to see what is happening in your ascendant in that house. So your ascendant is in Sagittarius and it is in Purva Ashada. So Purva Ashada, so that's one of the nakshatras. And basically what that is bringing forward is a refinement and basically a purification. So there's a need for you to do the work that you're doing through a level of purification for what you're offering and bringing forward. How you're helping others is through a level of purification. It definitely has a little bit of like, whenever we see that come up, it's like a little bit of like a majesty energy. So it's like people who have this come up have definitely have had past lives where they've, been in very privileged or very comfortable positions. So there's kind of a need to reacquire that to some degree through the work that you do. So it isn't just about, again, being, but it is about wanting to create the life that you want to have that experience of the life that you want to have. And where we go with that immediately is we see what the Lugna Lord is doing. So the Lugna Lord of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and Jupiter is hanging out in your 11th house. So it is about the experience of hopes, wishes, and dreams. So whenever we see that, there's an understanding around wanting to really fulfill an enjoyable life in this life where materialism is something that will be brought forward. So it is about bringing the spiritual world with the material world. So it's about merging those two. It is sitting in Libra, and so again, it's bringing forward that component of that connection again back to Venus. So again, the connection that's happening is through the higher wisdom teaching that's coming through the research that you're doing that is more otherworldly and esoteric in nature. And then what we do is we have a look to see what's happening in your 10th house. So this is where there's a huge clue that came into place for me, where I was like, okay, this is very interesting. So we talk a lot about a lot of the research I'm doing, a lot of the study that I do. You are also somebody who is definitely someone who studies for astrology, cosmology as well, in different ways. Like I would say the Jyotish path is definitely something that window is open for you, and that there's multiple levels of study that you have been doing. So when we look at the 10th house is sitting with the Falgunis. And so your sun and your Mercury are both there, and it's sitting in a house of Mercury. It's sitting in Virgo. So it's the medicine carrier, but it's the medicine carrier that's coming because of Mercury being there through what you communicate. And whenever the Falgunis come up, so Uttara Falguni or Purva Falguni, some of the other nakshatras, that is a very, 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 very strong indicator for basically anything to do with relationships, to do with marriage, to do with relationship contracts, and being able to really unfold what that looks like. And so it's funny because when I look at your chart, it's like, okay, so a lot of the study that I've been doing in the last, for quite some time, but really, really honing in and really like dropping in with the fine tooth comb into relationship study. This actually shows that this would be something that would actually unfold for you. So whether you bring that forward through like study, and you bring that forward from the way of bringing that information to others, whether it's through communication and podcasts, through a means that happens through you choosing to work with communication and work with Mercury very specifically. And it does show because of Sun and Mercury sitting there in the Falgunis, it's all about relationships. So it's very, very interesting. And really dropping into this can be the relationship we have to ourselves, we have to other, we have to, our higher callings. It can come out in many different ways. The Falgunis usually are very focused on this dynamic of relationships. So it's so interesting when I saw that, tying those pieces together, that there's a huge piece for you that is connected to understanding relationships on a very deep level. Like when I see this, what comes to mind immediately is, people that do like coaching and counseling work specifically for relationship issues, understanding where marriage breakdown is happening, understanding why there's conflict that's happening, understanding what's the karmic path that's happening between two people. Like that's what really stands out when I look at this. it's kind of fascinating because I've looked at it as a snapshot before for you, but it's like, oh, this is, yeah, it's just like it's a whole other level that's coming in. And just to tie this off, your moon and your Rahu are sitting in the ninth house, which again is the house of wisdom teachers and wisdom teaching. And so that's really activating this piece forward again. And it does show that it's in Maga. So it is about basically purification that's happening in regards to your own personal family lineage. So healing your family lineage through the work that you're doing, through helping other people to understand their relationships is what stands out. And it's also in Uttara Falguni or Rahu. So when the energy of this really kicks in, like it's very interesting. You could actually really feel a shift in yourself where it's like you have a very strong draw to understand relationships from this level and to be able to support other people with understanding their relationships.
Interesting, very interesting, fascinating.
How does that all land for you? Because it's I didn't see the Falguni component before in the past as much so it's fascinating to see this come in. And of course, how we sculpt things and how we maneuver things for ourselves is, is our own personal choice, right? Of course, we have freedom and we have our karmic will that is wanting to come through us. But yeah, how does that, what comes up for you?
So I feel like it is quite accurate. I am a bit of a natural counselor, and tapping into my past lives and my most recent past life, which I know me and you have talked about. It's kind of like it was put in a situation where I had to juggle. I was basically a diplomat in that lifetime, and so it's kind of, I feel like understanding people and relationships is natural for me, but I would have to the understanding of it is natural, but I've always been drawn towards business and in using my skill of understanding human nature and how to relate to somebody else on many levels, depending on where they are. That skill would come in handy when it comes to going into business of some sort. And I always thought that I would be in business having to do with real estate. And using my understanding of people and relationships as a way to succeed in business in that way. I never really looked at counseling or anything anything like that as a career, but the thought that putting myself out there on social media has occurred to me in the past. I don't think it's just time for that yet, but for sure, something to do with social media, having my own YouTube channel, things like that, and a business that has to do with real estate. Those things really popped out to me in terms of my vocation in life. But it is quite accurate that I understand, or that I see through people in a sense, and I have that ability to guide people in their relationships. But to do that as a career, I'm not sure. But it is accurate that I have that ability for sure.
Well, and I love the merging of the pieces that you just talked about, because there's different ways it can unfold. It's interesting too, because you have a lot of influences on the 11th house, which 11th house and 4th house can also bring forward a lot of activation in regards to real estate. And when I see this, it's like I could easily see somebody that's almost like a human resource manager, or is managing people and helping people to understand themselves. And also this component is strong that's there because of Sun aspecting your fourth house, which is all about real estate. It's all about the home and the home environment. And of course, your D1 chart, as we know, has a lot of influences in the fourth house as well. So it makes sense that this piece is also very strong and prevalent in your chart. So Mercury is looking at your fourth house, Sun is looking at your fourth house, and they're both in the 10th house of career and career focus. So it's, yeah, basically helping people to understand themselves, or helping to understand, like bringing contracts together and bringing forward relationship mergings together. I mean, that can also be seen as well too when we think of the Falgunis, because it is about signing contracts and paperwork. It's usually correlated towards like contracts of like marriage and relationship, and the marriage and relationship we have to house or house environment, or choosing to be endowed and embedded into something that is actually a material possession, also would come up with the signing of contracts. So that's interesting that that's also there very strongly. And yeah, and just looking that you have, yeah, this strong element. So the Jupiterian energy again is a very strong influence in the chart. I wouldn't be surprised if you even like in the same method as well too, if there's a couple of things that you actually do, because the spiritual piece is very, very strong in your chart because of the Venus placement. So there is this component that is wanting to come through. And
Also, as you know, Jupiter is my Atmakaraka planet in my D1 chart, and it's conjunct my moon
mhm,
um, in the ninth house.
yeah.
So there's a few pieces, and I don't know. I feel like it's my moon and Jupiter talking, but I feel like it will naturally just come together and express itself the way that my higher self meant for it to express itself in this lifetime. But it's interesting. You keep mentioning awareness. And it's I just keep having the thought. Everything that you're saying is accurate, but it would be interesting to me just to watch all this unfold and see how
Mhm.
how all of this really comes together. I'm curious more than anything else.
Well, and as we know too, the more we do spiritual path work, and the more we're really, we really drop into the being piece, life brings us what we're supposed to have. Like it almost like falls on our like drops on our doorstep, right? So,
Exactly.
this piece of still saying yes to life and still making steps forward, while also just being in the receptive element and letting things come to us, is a huge piece. I mean, if life orchestrates a situation where it's like a health issue arises, or, there's a dynamic that takes place with like home environment or something, it's like we have to step into what life is presenting. And that being said, there's that sweet spot of doing and being at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you said, it's a sweet spot. It's like a balancing act between doing and being, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I will cap it here so we don't go too long. I'm famous for going over time. So I will, yeah, I feel like I want to meditate a little bit on some of these pieces that presented as well too, because there's, there's sort of like the highest quality of how something can refine itself to come out in a chart, and what that looks like if we're living our path with that highest calling, versus some of the other ways that something can present itself within a chart, or present itself within the way that life wants to work through us and communicate with us.
So when you look at my D10 chart, what would you say are the the core factors in terms of my vocation in this lifetime? Like top three factors.
I'm gonna let you absorb what we talked about, because I could go on and on, as you do know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to cut it there. But Venus, Jupiter, your Lord of your first house, and looking into Purva Ashada, and looking at the aspects of your 10th house to your fourth house are very key.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
Cool.
All right. Okay. So thank you for playing and for being
Yes.
open and receptive. And yes, it's this is definitely some of my passion work for sure, is understanding ourselves on a much deeper level. So this is a taste of resistance to be able to drop in and do a little play and see what comes about.
Nice. Awesome.
Okay,
Thanks for having me.
absolutely. And I will stop the video now.